The stream is live. Are you really live though? Anyways, let's just pause. Probably can check this on LinkedIn. One second. Alrighty, great. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the Inspire Africa Conference webinar. Well, my name is Toby, co-founder of Venture for Africa. We essentially help mid to senior career folks transition into tech companies. That's like the easiest way to put it. But today I have a very interesting panel today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about doing product the East African way. That's a very interesting conversation, but just to give everyone a sense of what we're talking about, the idea is that when it comes to building on the continent, there's a lot of rules and a lot of things that seem to come from other markets that we maybe try to implement in our markets, but not everything works quite well. And so the idea for this conversation is just to talk to folks that are building on the ground and see, what it actually takes to do product on the continent. So, most PMs that work here start their product careers with a set of things that feel like truths. So these could be frameworks, books, mental models, strategies of how to really try to operate as a product person. And like I said, some of these truths travel quite well into our ecosystem and some of them don't. So we're really just going to be looking at that second bit in terms of trying to understand the kinds of product mindsets and strategies that don't really translate well and what it takes to actually build on the continent. Each of our three panelists today have sort of navigated that tension in different industries and contexts. So we're just going to use this very casual conversation to unpack that a little bit. So like I said, again, my name is Toby. You can drop your comments in the comment section. We're going to be monitoring that. And this is sort of like put together by Inspire Africa Conference. The team will probably share a little bit more about that later on, but it's a conference kicking off in Kigali this October. And if you think about all the amazing things that happen across product spaces, across all the different product managers in different markets, the Inspire Africa Conference is a way to gather all of them together in one place to trade ideas, trade, strategies, and really try to bring product thinking to life on the continent. All right, so that's that part of things. So we're going to dive into intros. And first up, we're going to be looking at James. So James is the head of product at Zeraki, and he's someone I've had quite a lot of conversations with when it comes to building and scaling. James has an entrepreneurial background, and he might talk on that a little bit, but he also has a very strong UX lens. Then we have Elizabeth, Lizzie for short, who is a senior product manager at Maisha Meds. I first met Elizabeth when she was working at Sendy, and so she's worked in two very interesting industries, so logistics and then now healthcare. And those industries tend to come with a lot of constraints when you're thinking about product. And then we also have Kingston, who is the founder and CEO of Left Biz Solutions and the former head of product at Boundless Pay. And so he's had experience working in different markets and can definitely talk from the idea of fintech and blockchain, which comes with all its other, bits as well. But I'll let each of them introduce themselves shortly. But welcome to the session. Hopefully we have a very productive time here. Enough words from me. James, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm actually so confused. You've said so much about me already. I wonder where to start. Okay, so as Toby said, I lead product and design at Zeraki. So Zeraki is an edtech company based in Kenya with roots in Uganda and several other countries in Africa. So we build tools for schools and just for learning and just enabling education in Africa. My background, again, as Toby said, is in design and engineering. So I've been skipping around this different product areas for the better part of 8-9 years of my career now. So yeah, super excited.
All right, cool, awesome. So quick notes, maybe one thing I forgot to add is after introduction, you can tell us a bit about the kind of product challenges you've been closest to in your career. You already touched on that a little bit, but if you can just call that out specifically.
I think for the better part of my career, a lot of the challenges I've been facing are process challenges. So I think most PMs really focus on just building products for users. I think the area where I have found myself gravitated towards is building processes for teams and building those product processes for teams. And I think that's where I've found my niche. As you say, I am really good and really bad at it at the same time. So it's a very exciting area to be in.
All right, cool, awesome, great. All right, Liz, you're up next. So just yourself in your own words, and then kind of product challenges you've been closest to so far.
Cool. I guess it's just addition to the introduction that you gave earlier. Yeah, so I'm a senior product manager at MyShameds. So MyShameds is a health tech startup with an inventory management app for pharmacies to basically just keep track of the inventory and do sales and kind of run their business. And we also use the same app to kind of run various interventions through the pharmacies in various disease areas like HIV, malaria, and etc. And that's kind of the part of the product where I'm mainly involved. And then I think before that I worked at Sendy, which is was a logistics startup, and I think with Sendy I was mainly like a product manager, and the kind of problems I was the problem space I was working in was a marketplace. So thinking about two different sets of users with different motivations and how to like bring them together. And it's kind of carried forward because also with healthcare, like as a product manager, you're mainly thinking about the user and like the business goals and all these things. But in health, like the end user is like the patient, but in our case we're building a platform for pharmacies, but then also like it's being paid for by a different category of user, and just thinking about how to navigate the needs of the different sets of stakeholders that you have in that space. So yeah.
Awesome. Great. I love the like different aspects that you both bring. And Kingston obviously comes from the fintech side. So Kingston, yes, quick intro to yourself and the kinds of product challenges you've been involved with.
All right. Good everyone. Nice to have everyone here on the call. All right. I've been around fintech for quite a while. I think getting to close to 7 years now. I started off first at Access Bank PLC, during my uni days, where I served as campus lead. I was with the marketing team as well. So part of what we were doing then was we were selling the banking products to students, helping students to onboard on some of those products, savings and all that. Then briefly after school, I'm working for a company called Boundless Pay. Boundless Pay fintech and blockchain startup, where we do remittances across Africa and outside Africa as well. And shortly afterwards, I started my own company, Aleph. So what we do at Aleph back in Nigeria is that we're very specific on investing into startups. So we've done over six startups already, exited from five actually. Four successful, one went south, and the other one we are about to exit this year. So that's the history in West Africa. Got into Kigali sometime last year, and I came with that similar approach. Look for startups, get invested in them, and help them go right. But then I got the shock of my life. Different kind of markets, different market size, different demand, different perspective, all that differently. And it's exciting because what it allows you to do is that it allows you to learn across multiple markets. And some of the challenges I think I've faced recently is actually having the same mindset across different markets. West Africa, as we know, it is a big market. Nigeria, for instance, I mean, we've built in Ghana, we've built in other regions as well. But when you come to Eastern Africa, it's quite different because two things is involved here. Two different markets exist in East Africa. One is more like the centralized market, the other is more like the truly decentralized market. And with that, you understand what I mean. So when you build across these different markets, you have to be very careful how you approach product building, because whereas one, customers determine how innovative a product should be. On the other hand, the government, based on policies, is determine how the product will be. So yeah, that's it.
All right, awesome, great. So we're going to dive into some of those things a little bit more specifically. Well, Sam Bryan, welcome. The algorithm popped it up. Thank God to the algorithms. So James, let's start with you, right? So, and I want to start off talking about what has shaped your product sense so far in terms of the way you think about building product. So thinking about the first time you started to do product, what were some of the like big ideas, books, frameworks that shaped or has shaped how you think about building products as a PM?
So building product, so like there's really no structured way of learning about product in Africa. So like most people find themselves in product from different directions and different means. So it's really a cluster of I've read this book or this article or this thing, and like some of like the key beliefs, like you read like lean product process or like lean startup, and like you get this understanding that once you get PMF, growth is inevitable. Like once you have like a good UX, like nothing can stop you and all that. So it's been a really interesting like mix of like learning. But I think once I like started reflecting back, my first job was as an instructional designer at Moringa School, which is basically like a training program for what's it called, guys who just want to learn how to like code. When I joined in 2017, basically just like a training program, like people want to learn how to code, and it's not traditionally a product role, but as a learning or like curriculum developer, your product is people. Your product is like the curriculum. So you have to like make sure that it is accurate, it is good, it works, it can convert, it can actually do its job. And I think that's where I started learning about this idea of relationships and how like these relationships affect your success of your product, especially here in Africa. Like you just can't build something and expect it to grow. You can't. You can have the best UX, you can have the best processes, you can solve the problem the best than anything else. But if you don't have the relationships with the customers, like the relationship with the users, or the relationship with like the outcome, the people that are supposed to like give you the outcomes, I don't think you can succeed. So I think that was also like a really fundamental learning experience where you have to like learn how to build those relationships first, then start what's it called, then start like understanding how to like solve the problem a bit better.
Okay, awesome, great. And so some of these questions I'll ask each of you like one by one, and sometimes I'll skip through just to make sure we can cover the breadth. But Liz, I'm curious about you as well. So in terms of what has shaped your identity as a product manager, in terms of everything you've done so far to this point.
Yep. So I think for me, what has truly like shaped how I approach problems as a product manager has just been like the simple question why. Just taking a problem, breaking it down into like first principles, and then like rebuilding it from there, and just focusing on why it's a problem rather than what's the problem. And I think like when I was starting out, we would always like just read through like the Silicon Valley product group channel and all these things. And I think one of the earliest realization that we had as a team was like, oh my gosh, we're in a feature factory. and we need to like start thinking about what the outcomes that we want to achieve are. So I think first principles thinking would be like one of the things that like I live by. And then I think the other thing that hasn't changed despite what all the articles might be saying now is agile, actually. And the reason I say this is like, to me, the agile mindset is basically like figure out where you are, take a small step toward whatever goal you want to make, then adjust your learnings based on that, right? Like that's all it is. Forget about Jira or tools and all these things. It's just like what you want to do, and how will you know you have achieved it,
Yeah. I'm curious, just you said something earlier about like why, and there was a phrase you said that kind of like stuck, but I'm trying to remember exactly what you said when you said why.
I said that like you need to just understand why something is a problem rather than what the problem is, and like keep asking why. And it also just kind of builds up on what James was saying about building relationships with your users, because you can't answer why if you don't know why it's a problem for your users, basically.
Yeah.
I guess.
Awesome.
Is that what you're coming from?
Yeah, that was exactly what you said. Why the problem, not what.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. All right, Kingston. So James has talked about relationship with users. Liz has talked about why, not what, and then obviously first principles and agile thinking. So for you, what are some of the things that have formed and I guess shaped your product sense as a product person?
Oh yeah, I'm interested in this insight by my colleagues. For me, one of the things that has changed my perspective as it comes to products across different markets, for me is actually how they perceived a particular product. So it's a typical example. Um, at Kazi Connect, where I'm currently the PPM, we're looking at expanding our market base across not just East Africa to Western Africa as well, and try to see how we can tap into the Central African market as well. And I was given a specific KPI, right? And the KPI, obviously, from this market perspective, it's a large number. Over there in Nigeria, it's something that two or three communities can give to you, right? But then again, when we now look at market size as it relates to product marketing, you want to actually pay attention to some of the factors that influence it, right? And of course, my preferred go-to, as it is in this conversation, is that across the other part of Africa, which is Western Africa, Nigeria to be precise, the citizens or the users, right? They're the ones that determine how innovative it should be. They're the ones that will tell you, okay, guys, you know what? I don't think I'm feeling this product, or I think you should do this and do that. Of course, you know how loud Nigerians are, especially when it comes to Twitter, right? We can like make or break any product at all. We just need one tweet, and the whole goons is coming after you. Over here, right? You're more paying attention to listen to the policies that are around it. I've never been more conscious about policies, right, until I came to East Africa. So we're looking at the Kenyan market, we're looking at the Ugandan market, looking at the Tanzanian market, we're looking at the Rwandan market, and one question that always comes to mind is: so where did the government stand in products like this, right? What frameworks have they built? Because the worst thing you want to do is to build something anti the government, right? It's a different scenario when you're building it in your homeland, right? And when you're building it somewhere else, right? When you're building somewhere else, you have to be very careful so you don't get yourself and get your teammate into trouble. If it's in Nigeria, the government listens a lot as to, okay, so we understand we don't have a framework around this, but if it's what the market demands, right, we can be able to play around it. It gives you that room to be innovative, right? So these are like some of the instances that I've learned across. Pay more attention to detail as to,
Yeah.
okay, what works here and what does not work here, and yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Awesome. Great. So it's quite interesting that you're here talking about East Africa, obviously, as a West African building in the markets, because you now have two East Africans on the call that can maybe fact check you in terms of what you're saying or validate what you're saying. So actually curious to hear what James and Liz think about that. All right. So we've talked about, in terms of what has shaped your thinking, right? So for James, you've talked about relationships. For Liz, you've talked about, why, not what, and just first principle thinking. And Kingston, you sort of like have commented from the idea of different markets to determine sort of like shape what happens with your products, where if you're in a market where there's a lot of user voices, that's usually tends to be the case. In a different market, it could be, in your case, like you've said, the government. So now I want to move next into a little bit about what Kingston has started to talk about already, which is, as you go deeper into certain markets, what are some things that haven't or don't typically go as expected? So like, Liz, you mentioned you looked at the Silicon Valley Product Group books, Inspire Africa, the book, the book that Marty Keegan has written, for example. There's a lot of principles that are very rich inside some of these places. So I'll actually start with you here, and which is, what's something that you've seen in sort of like a book or framework that you've tried to apply and that hasn't worked quite well? And maybe first you've questioned if it was you not implementing it, but as time has gone on, you've seen this is just something that needs to look different when it comes to our markets. And it's a bit of a broad question, but hoping you can find like an example you can share.
Okay, so I have like I can think of like a situation where like I wouldn't say that we necessarily had tried to implement a framework or something that we had learned, but I found that often people rush into like we rushed into we rushed into like the implementation and like let's like take this thing and like turn it into a product, and we're a tech startup, right? As opposed to like, okay, but what are we actually trying to do here, right? Like, and it's happened with whatever is the rage at the time in the tech ecosystem. So if it was like, oh my gosh, everyone is building an Android app, let's all build apps for something, or if right now it's AI, right? Like everywhere, let's find something to slap AI onto, without necessarily being like, is this solving for a problem that we actually have, right? So in our case, we built a marketplace because marketplaces were all the rage at the time, and we were having trouble getting users to place orders on the marketplace, because you have the app, but like the people already, and the main reason, like after digging deeper, doing some user research and all that, was like because we had a long onboarding process. Meanwhile, from like the operations and sales teams and all these people, they had their own targets around like number of orders they need to meet. And for them, like, I know this person, we have a relationship, we can just put this on a spreadsheet and it's done, and I'll have met my targets. But until you're like, hey, think about it. The day we're at 10,000 or more orders, you can't scale yourself essentially. So maybe we need to like think about the product and figure out how to improve it so that everyone is using the app and going with it. And in those ways, I actually tend to agree a lot with like certain principles that have come up in like Inspired and all this, like around knowing the problem and like not like getting immediately attached to a solution and deciding that's what you want to do. And in sometimes you might find, especially on these parts of the world, oftentimes like maybe tech isn't necessarily the first the solution we should be looking at, like and that's why I was like finding out why and going to first principles, because it's not always that like building an app or doing something is why we should do something.
Yeah. 100%. Because sometimes we think about the most innovative things, and a lot of times it feels as if it's the tech. I think before AI, a lot of things that were innovative weren't necessarily the tech that was innovative. It was the process and the thinking of the way to combine what you already have to solve something. Now AI is even that itself, it's really just machine learning that has been productized in a way that makes sense for us, right? And so I think what you're saying again is, a lot of times don't get married into building something fancy for these things, but it's getting our markets and how people tend to respond to things. James, is there something you want to add to that in terms of I guess something that you've seen break down quite quickly here when it comes to like product thinking or product strategies and frameworks?
I think one of like the interesting things about like building in Africa is there's very little infrastructure to support like the tech building, right? So something that Liz has mentioned, which was sometimes tech is not the best solution for it, right? And I think I saw this firsthand when I was like building my own product, and I was like, okay, fine, I have this problem. It's a real problem. I can validate it's a problem. I can find 100 people that say it's a problem, but you don't really, until you actually start like doing research and start understanding that, oh, this problem is tied to this other problem that's tied to this other problem, that okay, this infrastructure has not been built yet. So I think I spent 3 months building the most beautiful, elaborate solution I could possibly imagine, if I do say so myself. Then I realized, oh my God, this solves a problem for like 1,000 people. Fine, but it doesn't really scale the way I want it to scale. It doesn't really grow the way I want it to grow because it has limitations, has roadblocks. And I think that's one of like the most interesting things about like building in this context, like where you have to like understand that one, the ecosystem, like you have to like really pay attention to the ecosystem, which is not something that you find a lot in when you read like this Western books or like listen to like this blogs, because a lot of like the infrastructure for them has been built already, so that like literally just building on top of it. Then also, I think one thing that I also realized was you can build the most elaborate thing in the world. It can solve a real problem, but even if your tech works, if you don't have incentives in place to like make people change, your solution will not be like adopted. Your solution will never really scale past a certain point. So you also have to like consider multiple things outside your product, outside the problem, when actually building in like in this context.
Yeah, no, that's super great, right? And to help people crystallize this as an example, you think of Amazon and the whole delivery process. Before Amazon built out their whole fulfillment centers and logistics arms, they were riding off of UPS pretty much, which is the existing postal delivery service in the US. And they just plugged into that system and it made it easier for them to get to market. But if you're going to do that on a continent, you're starting to build out those systems yourself. But okay, let's even say you built them out. Address systems, right? In the US and all these markets, those have already been done, right? Here in Africa, you then have startups trying to build addressing systems so that they can help other people figure out delivery and all the sorts of things. So this idea of infrastructure is definitely a strong thing where you almost have to, as a startup, become an expert at everything you need for your solution to get into the market. And that's not a startup's job at the end of the day, but you end up having to do these things yourself. I was reading a story about, again, this is a very traditional company, but they're the guys that produce Indomie in Nigeria. They had to build out their entire value chain. Dangote, he's trying to get a refinery built in Nigeria. He did build the refinery. He's had to build out the entire value chain. And so these are like even traditional industries, not to talk of tech. So anyways, that's just something to think about. So Kingston, just very quickly to add to, is there anything different you want to add to what James and Liz have said in terms of, you've already started to talk about this in terms of like governments, right? And how governments position themselves, some of these things. But is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to pick a cue from what Lizzie said earlier, right? And when we look at products and we talk about innovation, most of the times, most tech founders feel that it's all about the product. Whereas that can be true. It's not always true. We also have other realities that affect the market. You can have an exciting product, but what if that product is not customer centric, right? What happens then, right? You launch a product to the market. You and your team believe it's an amazing product, but then the market does not see it that way, right? Then you launch and nobody's using your product. So I think that one of the pinpoints we should be able to do as innovators, as product builders across Africa as it is to have the people in mind. At Boundless Pay, when I was a CMO, currently right now I'm the Chief Partnership Officer. One of the things we constantly did as we were building was that we had the mind of the people at heart. No matter the stage your product is, you're always going to have people who are going to use it, right? Sometimes we feel that our product have to be 10/10% perfect for the market. Now, a product is 1/10%, right? You still have people who will use it. The truth is that most people want to be part of your story. I don't know how many of us here would recall how Facebook used to look like 2010 or 2009, right? If you look at Facebook then, we have people who were using Facebook then. That was not the best version of Facebook as compared to where Facebook is now, right now, right? But one of the things that Meta have done, and of course Twitter and all of that tech product is that they've evolved with the people, right? You don't need to have a perfect product. You need to have the people at your mind. So where my product is right now, who are the people who are going to use it, right? How comfortable are they going to be using this particular product, right? Then the next plan will be, okay, so if these are the category of people who are going to be using this product per time, what does the next phase look like? I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, Emmanuel. He's the CEO of Big Credo. And one question he kept asking over time during the conversation is, Kingston, how does one identify growth, right, in its product phase, right? How do you say, okay, yeah, we are growing? Are you measuring that just with numbers, or are you measuring that with with your customer retention strategy, or are you measuring that with the lifelong base of your customers, right? So we really need to not just think about the tech in itself, right? But then, where my product is at this particular time, who are the people using it? How comfortable are they using it? When you've been able to innovate at that particular level, right? The next level, it's easy to transit because, often at times, I've been in Facebook for about 15 years now, right? Off my head, I can't even recall what Facebook looked like when I initially joined. But I can tell that they've been tremendous progress, right? Amazing progress over the years, and that is really what innovation is. Innovation is not something exciting. If you look at the whole story of how innovative products come to be, sometimes it's just somebody who just try to address a particular problem. I keep using Facebook a lot, because why? Uncle Mark, I love him so much. He was just trying to address a particular program in his school, right?
Yeah.
He built it for just a particular set of people, right? And over time, it grew. Right now, the whole world is using it. So yeah, let's get to a point where we have a product. We're trying to address a particular kind of market. It must not be perfect, but at least it's solving problem at that particular level. And over time, we are open enough with growth mentality. We are growing, and we have an experience where someone will look back and say, "I started using this guy's product 15 years ago. They are so much better." Rather than just focusing on how amazing this product should be. I want this product to address 10 million needs. Men, focus on one need and grow gradually. And I think this particular idea, right, can serve whether you're in East Africa or you're in West Africa. But then again, right, two different markets, two different strategies, but the same mindset can prevail across both. Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that. And I think you're right. Obviously, like most of the innovative products are not innovative from scratch. Like even let's look at ChatGPT, that's very popular today. Initially, when they opened up, it was very different, but they've layered on, seen how people have used it, and it's where it is today. But obviously, when you have investors breathing down your neck, it's always a different kind of conversation in terms of how quickly you're trying to grow. But that's a separate conversation. Okay, so James, let's go back to you, and this is kind of like some of the final questions I'll be asking. So think of James 5-10 years ago, right? At the beginning of his product career or just building, products, what's something that you were kind of doing over then that you think, well, now if you could go back in time, you'll stop yourself from doing. And we've kind of touched on some of these things before, but wondering if there's any other interesting story that you've stopped practicing and has changed the way you build products today.
I think this is something that Liz had said, which is now like the feature factory mentality. I think now I am very keen on data as like the metric to guide where your like product should go, and even as you're working with product teams, helping them understand that they're not married to the feature, but they're married to the outcome. So until the product team is agreed on like this is the outcome, this is the direction I want to go, a feature can come and go. A feature is not great. A feature can be great. A feature can be horrible. But I think all of these things are just experiments that are leading to a particular outcome. And once a team is married to an outcome, once they understand that this is the metric we're trying to move, it makes it easier for them to like decide, okay, so I am. It doesn't matter what feature I build. I can experiment very quickly. I can try new things. I can plug in different pieces. So I think getting an idea of like the outcome first is now like the mentality to like build from. I think that has been something that I really want. I hope. I wish I did a few years back. And I think another thing is just like mapping stakeholders before you start mapping users. I think that's super important because sometimes you have like an idea of like who your user is in your mind, and you start building with that narrative. And sometimes their needs might be synergetic to like what you're trying to build. But then like when you get to like the market and you like realize, oh, I am very wrong. This is definitely not the user, or I've not really considered some of like the nuances and cultural context. So, and I think one thing I can give an example for is when I was building like my company, I was building it for landlords, right? Like again, landlords have specific problems. Landlords are XYZ, right? And I had like all these nuances about what a landlord is. And then you go to market and you realize, oh, I can't actually find a landlord, right? And why can't I find a landlord? Because they hate managing property. They would rather hire someone to manage their property. So yes, their problems are legitimate, but they're not the users, right?
Yeah.
And like so you have to like map all those stakeholders like much earlier on and understand their needs and like understand how they're layered on top of each other. I think that's something I wish I'd learned much earlier.
All right, awesome, love that. So yes, your users are not always your stakeholders. Your stakeholders have a greater influence on how things should actually be designed as opposed to the user you have in mind. Liz, how about you? 10 years ago, what were you doing, and essentially what are you going to try to do now?
I think that like like back then product was new, and in like the setup that I was working at the time, we were a new team, and like we were basically like bottlenecks between the sales or operations team and the tech team by like having, you have to let us know, and all these things, and I think like back then my frustration was always that like, oh, this we're not a product led company. um,
Yeah.
because in my head, like at the time I was like, oh, the product should be defining the strategy, but over time I've come to find, again, just adding on to what James was saying about stakeholder mapping, once you figure out what's important to like your users and what's the goal for the organization, like you are product led by just helping them get to wherever they want to go as a product manager in that way. So I think like, just going back to like what I said at the first part, just agile and
Yeah.
understanding why. Yeah, I would
Cool.
say.
All right, awesome, great. So Kingston, we have a question in here that I think would set you up quite nicely, because you've talked a little bit about building in different markets. And so the question here is, how does culture influence the way you design or launch a product, right? And you mentioned this already when you talked about how in some markets like Nigeria, it's very user-facing, users determined, and in other markets like East Africa, it's very government-led. Is there anything else you want to add to that, just to answer this question?
Okay, yeah. I had okay. So first off, right, culture and its people, and when you want to address questions like this publicly, right, you want to be very careful on some of your discoveries you found. But let me just shoot right ahead for the sake of the conversation and for the sake of the question that was asked. I might not use the best of words right now, but this is the closest I could get to the kind of words I want to use. Cultures. Of course, we know that Western African markets, they are more we are more extroverted, right? We are more adventurous, right? For most of the times, we want to experiment new stuff. Not because the previous product we are using was bad or anything, but we just want to see what advantage we can find by using this product. I was having a conversation sometime some weeks back with couple of my friends. We were chilling at a nice place called Makoko in Rwanda here. Nice food. So we're chilling and we're talking, and somebody asked a random question. Somebody asked me, Kingston, how many bank accounts do you have? And I told the guy, I think off my head I have like 4 to 5. And I was like, why do you have 4 to 5 bank accounts? And I'm like, well, we just feel like that should be like the best thing we should do. And he was like, all my years I've just used just one, and I'm like, it's not really like a bank account. It's different. The services are kind of the same because they're all in the same industry with the same laws, right? But we just want to just experiment over here. For the lack of better words, I think that East Africans um, are more are more introverted. You know,
Keep going. We,
and
we
for
have we'll bring James on to really talk about it. But yes, continue. Yes.
so so I think that you guys are more introverted, and how you perceive Christians, how you perceive products is different. It comes from a place of really really deep thinking, right? I remember we were trying to launch a product here for one of our partnering firms, and for the first time in my life, in my entire life, right? Believe in me, by December I'm going to be 32, right? So you can imagine, like, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 16 or something like that. So for the first time in my life, somebody was asking me, how will my data be used, right? It was asking about data protection laws, and I'm like, that's a question you can never find in Nigeria. Nobody really cares, right? If you want to sell, that's your business, right? And so when you build in this market, because of and again, I may not be able to use the right words, right? But this is the best I can do because of how people perceive products. They want to really ask those questions, and it gives you some very sense of deep understanding to what you're building, right? So, across market, across culture, Nigeria, we don't mind, right? We want to just jump in, right? Provided your marketing is loud, we want to jump in, we don't care. You ask us how old you are, what's your gender, what's your sexual orientation, we're giving you everything. But if someone is asking you, why do you want to do my age? I can remember, I was talking with a friend, so he was running a survey, and somebody had asked him for his LinkedIn, for his LinkedIn link. In the Google form, you could see people respond, that is personal, that is private. We're like, hey man, we want to check you out on LinkedIn. Right, you get what I'm saying? So across the market, over here people are more conscious about why they're using this particular product, and for that it gives you that yardstick to step back a bit, and you're like, okay, they're going to ask you lots of questions, they're going to ask you some questions they're not comfortable with. You really need to think, and I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't blame the East Africans. It's because of, again, right, the government policy around such industry, right? So over here, people subconsciously or unconsciously, they care about what I do in my data, right? Data protection laws in Nigeria. So these are the various different cultures across different industries and how you build differently, right?
Okay.
Nigeria, people would normally want to jump in and experiment. Over here, somebody will tell you, yeah, I have somebody providing me that service, I don't think I'm going to need yours. And
Yeah.
so these are just
Cool.
the differentiation.
All right. Thanks, Kingston. Thanks, Kingston. So really, really great thoughts in there. And I'm going to pull you, James, in because I know you've spent some time building in West Africa. So can you validate or invalidate some of the things Kingston has shared as we start to wrap up today?
I think so, because I think in West Africa everything moves much faster than here. I think from idea to market and just testing moves a bit much faster here than here. I think in East Africa there's a, how can I put it? There's a bias towards fintech in East Africa. I feel like this has always been the structure behind what majority of the companies in East Africa are doing. So it's either one way or another attached to fintech. But as you start moving to more granular problems or granular industries, so education, health, logistics, you start to find the problems are much deeper and much more nuanced, and you have to start even educating the customer that, hey, this is a problem that you have. So I don't even know that it's a problem that you have. This is a problem that you have, because I've seen a lot of companies that come in assuming the user knows that they know that the problem, right? If you go to, I think, one of the companies that what's her name? I forget the name. They were building, essentially was just mapping out delivery from farm to market, right? The farmer doesn't understand that the problem is they're getting low prices. They're used to those prices. They're blaming the government for the low prices. They're not blaming the middleman who's actually consuming that low price. So I think a lot of the problems, especially when you go outside the fintech universe in East Africa, they become very harder to solve because you have to now start educating the user, understanding how them understand the problem, show them a better way, and now convince them to use the better way, which is again a whole challenge on its own. But yeah,
Right.
things move faster in West Africa.
Awesome, great. So there's a comment in there around what West Africa should learn from East Africa's successes. I guess I'll let Liz. I don't know what you want. Maybe you have a comment to pull in here, and then just quick call out to everyone. This is put together by the Inspire Africa conference, and it's kicking off in Rwanda, Kigali, where in October. And so you can follow the link, just follow the banner in there to find out more about that. But to take us home, Liz, yes, what should West Africa learn from East Africa's successes?
Oof. I've never thought about what West Africa can learn from East Africa. It depends on what the West Africans want to achieve, I think. Like, you can find lessons anywhere, really, I think. But I think just to add on like the culture question, maybe, if I could, I think that if sorry, I'm just inventing my own question at this point, but one thing I think like I appreciate from the West African side is just the directness of feedback. And you think about like communication and how much as a product manager you have to like when you're doing user research and all that, and you're like trying to dig into like the user's needs and like understand them better, and you're getting like roundabout-ish answers and all this. I find that with users in West African regions, they'll just be like, listen, I don't like your app, and here is why, you know. And it's good because like constructive feedback is excellent for like knowing, helping you tweak which direction you should be moving towards. So yeah, I guess on the other hand, probably like spending more time in the discovery phase of things. Maybe that's something we do. These are assumptions, opinions that I'm making. But I would say perhaps that's something that West Africa can pick up from West Africa.
Cool. All right. Maybe I can jump in here as well. I'm more from the customer lens. I think East Africans, at least Nairobi and Kenya to be specific, I think there's more willingness to pay for consumer products. Either it's buying tickets to like, certain kinds of things or subscribing to certain kinds of services. In West Africa, it's like you make your fee from transaction fees. Like you should be giving the person something else and taking your cut out of it, but don't charge me directly for something just because you're an app. I think there's less of a willingness to pay for certain things that I've noticed, if it doesn't have to do with someone making money or like spending money to get a service in that kind of way. So I could be wrong, but I think when we tried to do a few things in West Africa, it was a lot difficult, and East Africa has just been smooth flowing in a kind of way. Maybe it's relative. One thing I've also noticed sometimes is that, we West Africans, for example, we come into East Africa, we're like, oh, all of these things are so easy. And East Africans are looking at us like, what do you mean it's easy? This is difficult. But we're comparing it to something else. We're comparing it to like a situation that doesn't even exist anymore. And so I think as a product manager, really getting to experience different markets helps you to understand, what are you taking for granted? What can you build around in an interesting kind of way? And yeah, just how savvy people are in different markets. I think East Africa, because of M-Pesa, there's a lot of people are quite familiar with like the idea of digital money and digital savings and things like that. In Nigeria, there's a lot more, we call it mobile banking, but it's pretty much internet banking, which removes it from a certain crowd of people that you still have to go and educate when you start to build like mobile solutions. Anyways, I've yapped a lot. Thank you guys for all your contributions. Maybe let me just give you guys 10 seconds. I'm going to be typing you guys just 10 seconds, final words. We'll start with you, Kingston. Just 10 seconds in terms of the topic today, the conversation today, what you've picked up from James or Liz, just final words to everyone. And then we'll go around the room and call it a day.
All right. First off, I want to appreciate Inspire Africa Conference. Thanks for inviting me over, and also thanks to my other colleagues who are here, Toby, James, and Liz. It's nice listening to your perspective, and of course, hearing what it feels like. Within me, I've picked up 18 or 2, and I'll be very much excited to engage as many persons as possible across LinkedIn, preferably. So, sure, I'm always active on LinkedIn. Hook me up, and we could have an amazing time together. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks, Vincent. James, how about you?
I think for me, one of the key highlights has been just like this idea of like continuous discovery and just like keeping learning and understanding why and why and why and why, and just like mapping your stakeholders and understanding the people you're building for. I think that's super important. I think learning from Kingston from the perspective of like Rwanda, and again, like Liz, I've worked with Liz for a while. So I think it's this very interesting dynamic, and I think I'm really appreciative of like where we're going at the product space in Africa, because we're really solving unique problems, and we're building, like, we're essentially IBM in like the 1970s, like, but like with more tech and like better Wi-Fi. So it's a really interesting experience, like building in Africa at this point in time.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, James. Liz, last but not least.
Yeah, I've also really just enjoyed speaking with the panelists as well around product and how we approach different problems and stuff. So yeah, that was super fun for me. And like uh, in general, it feels like we're all aligned around like how we approach things. And so I guess like wherever you are in the world, product management is basically just knowing your user and the business goal, and then taking small steps towards getting there. So the rest is just like tools and frameworks. So yeah, that's
Yeah, awesome. Great. Final word from me is, folks, let's write a lot more and share a lot more. I think what sometimes happens and why there's a lot more content to consume from other markets is because we're not that into like writing and sharing our stories, because sometimes we don't believe the things that we're doing are special. But someone told me something somewhere, which is, you're going to say things the way you're going to say things, and somebody might only hear it if you say it. So there's a lot of words out there. There's people have written things, but somebody wouldn't hear it until you yourself say it. So, whatever you've done, whatever little problems you've tried to figure out, write about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. AI makes everything easy now these days. So, just put something out there and, hopefully that inspires someone to do something else. No pun intended. All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you for, joining us today. Hope it was a good conversation. Thank you, James. Thank you, Kingston. Thank you, Liz. Look forward to catching you guys in, I guess, as we continue to build. All right. Peace out, guys. All right. Bye.
Bye.